What is the best game ever made? Depending on who you ask, you'll usually hear the same two answers: The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, or Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 is now over 20 years old and is still often called one of the greatest games of all time. So I wanted to finally find out for myself, playing it in 2025. Welcome to Login. In this review, I'll be breaking down Half-Life 2 using my own 100-point rubric, balancing personal enjoyment with objective game design to see how it really holds up today. Let's get into it. Alright, let's start with the story and setting. Half-Life 2 drops you straight into its world, and that's one of its biggest strengths. There are no long cutscenes or big explanations. You arrive in City 17, a place that's clearly already been taken over, and the game immediately makes you curious. What happened here? Who are these enemies? And how did the world end up like this? The setting itself is really strong. The Combine feels mysterious and threatening, and the game doesn't rush to explain everything, which makes it more interesting. City 17 feels controlled, watched, and uncomfortable in a very deliberate way. The main themes are clearly oppression, surveillance, resistance, and control. And those ideas come through naturally just by playing. One thing I really love is how the story is told. There are basically no traditional cutscenes, and you never lose control of your character. Everything happens through environmental storytelling, dialogue.
It's gonna take some doing to get him out. Let's get out of here.
And events around you. That makes the game feel very immersive, because you're always part of what's happening. Gordon Freeman is a silent protagonist, but it works surprisingly well. Instead of feeling disconnected, it actually helps you project yourself into the world. When it comes to characters, Alex is easily the highlight. She's charming, funny, and very likable, and the dialogue between characters feels natural. There's a great balance between humor and seriousness, and the characters feel believable.
What the hell is that? A Combine zombie. That's like a zombine, right? Zombine, get it?
That said, I wouldn't say Half-Life 2 has an especially strong or emotionally memorable plot. For me, the story itself isn't the main reason this game stands out. I think there are plenty of games with more powerful narratives. The real strength here is the setting, the atmosphere, and the characters. Half-Life 2 stands out because of how immersive its world is. Especially for its time, it really redefined storytelling in first-person games. For story and setting, I'm giving Half-Life 2 an 8 out of 10. Moving on to gameplay and controls. Even though Half-Life 2 is over 20 years old, the gameplay honestly still holds up today, and that's kind of crazy. For its time, it was revolutionary, especially because of how much the game is built around physics-based interaction. And even now, it still feels surprisingly impressive. At its core, yes, this is a first-person shooter. You've got pistols, SMGs, shotguns, and rocket launchers, and the shooting itself feels good. It's responsive, it's smooth, and the moment to moment, it's fun to play. But let's be real, the true highlight here is the gravity gun. Being able to grab objects from the environment and launch them at enemies is still incredibly fun. And what I love is that the game really encourages you to experiment. You're constantly thinking, okay, what can I throw at someone now? You've got things like those spinning circular saw plates, chairs, crates, barrels, and yes, even random stuff like watermelons or paint cans. Half the fun is just asking yourself, will this actually kill an enemy? And surprisingly often, the answer is yes. The combat really rewards creativity. Enemy variety also forces you to change how you approach fights, and a lot of the gameplay isn't about traditional puzzles, it's about understanding the environment, how physics work, and figuring things out on your own. The game does not hold your hand at all, and sometimes you will get a bit stuck. One thing that genuinely surprised me was the difficulty. On normal mode, the first half of the game felt pretty manageable, but especially toward the final chapters, things get brutal. Enemies can kill you very quickly, health isn't always easy to find, and I definitely had to save scum more than I expected. Honestly, normal difficulty feels harder than hard in a lot of modern games. Overall, the gameplay is fun, creative, and incredibly well designed. And it's still hard to believe this game is over 20 years old. The gravity gun alone might be one of the best weapon ideas ever put into a video game. For gameplay and controls, I'm giving Half-Life 2 a 10 out of 10. Next up is game and level design, and this is honestly one of Half-Life 2's biggest strengths. One thing the game does incredibly well is variety. Almost every chapter introduces a new idea or a new way to play, so it never really feels repetitive. You've got driving sections, where you're moving around in the car, open areas, where you're exploring a bit more, and then completely different feeling chapters, like Ravenholm, where you're basically relying on the gravity gun the whole time and just trying to survive. Then there are sections where the game introduces completely new mechanics. You're not just fighting enemies anymore. At one point you're commanding antlions, these big aggressive insect-like creatures, and sending them to attack enemies for you, which completely changes how you move through combat. Later on, you also get moments where you're fighting alongside human resistance squads, and those encounters feel very different. What I really like is that even though Half-Life 2 is mostly linear, it never feels restrictive. The physics system gives you so much freedom in how you deal with situations that the levels still feel open and flexible. You're constantly using the environment around you, whether it's for combat, puzzles, or just figuring out how to move forward. There is some exploration, especially in the driving sections, but it's also smartly balanced. A lot of the time, going too far off the main path can actually cost you more health and ammo than you gain, which encourages you to think carefully instead of just wandering around everywhere. Overall, each chapter feels unique and fresh. It's easy to see why Half-Life 2 became a blueprint for modern FPS level design, and why so many games still borrow ideas from it today. For game and level design, this is an easy 10 out of 10. Next up, player choice. Half-Life is pretty linear game, and there are no narrative choices at all. You're not making story decisions, and honestly, that's fine. The game was never trying to be that kind of an experience. Where player choice does exist is mostly in how you approach gameplay. The level design and physics system give you some freedom in combat. You can deal with situations in different ways, depending on what weapons you use, how aggressive you play, or how much you rely on the environment and the gravity gun. Enemy encounters often allow multiple approaches, even if the overall path forward is fixed. That said, the range of playstyles is still fairly limited. At its core, you're still shooting enemies or throwing things at them, just in more creative ways. There are difficulty options, but beyond that, there aren't a lot of systems for customization. So for me, player choice is in one of Half-Life 2's strongest areas. For player choice, I'm giving Half-Life 2 a 7 out of 10. And next up, graphics and art style. It's honestly hard to believe this game is over 20 years old. Yes, it does show its age in places, but overall the world still looks really good, especially in indoor environments. Some sections genuinely hold up better than I expected. And for the art style, Half-Life 2 has a very clean, grounded visual style that's aged surprisingly well. The environments feel realistic, but there's also this subtle dystopian sci-fi layer on top of everything that fits the tone of the game perfectly. In the more open areas, especially during the driving sections, the graphics do start to look a bit more dated, but even then, it never really looks bad. It just looks like a game from its time, and that's totally fine. One thing that really surprised me is the facial animations. They're actually very good, even by today's standards. Honestly, I'd argue they're better than in some much newer games. And yes, I'm looking at you, Mass Effect Andromeda. These facial animations were revolutionary back in 2004, and they still feel expressive and believable. So for graphics and art style, I'm giving Half-Life 2 a 10 out of 10. And then quickly, performance and stability. Half-Life 2 is extremely well optimized. Of course, I'm playing this in 2025, but based on my own research, what I know from its launch, it was already performing really well back in 2004. For performance and stability, this is an easy 10 out of 10. Next up, sound, music and voice acting. Soundtrack in Half-Life is pretty minimalist, and that feels very intentional. There's a lot of electronic and ambient music, very early 2000s in style, but it's not really trying to be catchy or memorable. Instead, it's used sparingly to support tension and atmosphere. And because of that, I wouldn't say the music itself really stuck with me, but at the same time, it works really well in that moment. The music knows when to step in and when to disappear, which actually helps the immersion a lot. The sound design is where things really shine. Ambient sounds, distant noises, and environmental audio all work together to create a constant feeling of unease. The world always feels alive and often a little bit threatening, even when nothing is actively happening. Voice acting is easily the strongest part of this category.
I believe he broke your record, honey.
The performances are excellent, especially for a game from this era. NPC dialogue feels natural, dynamic, and believable, and characters sound like real people reacting to real situations. So overall, while the music isn't particularly memorable on its own, the sound design and voice acting are doing a lot of heavy lifting here. For sound, music, and voice acting, I'm giving Half-Life 2 an 8 out of 10. Next up, innovation and creativity, and honestly, this is where Half-Life 2 really earns its legendary status. This game didn't just improve first-person shooters, it genuinely redefined them. The physics system was absolutely groundbreaking at the time. And then, there's a constant introduction of new mechanics. Just when you think the game has shown you everything, it introduces another idea, another twist, or another way to interact with the world. Honestly, the gravity gun alone could justify a high score here. It's one of the most creative and influential weapon designs ever made. But when you combine that with the physics system, level design, storytelling approach, and overall gameplay philosophy, it's easy to see how much this game influenced almost every FPS that came after it. For innovation and creativity, this is the easiest 10 out of 10 so far. Next up, length and value. These days, Half-Life 2 is very easy to find for a cheap price, especially during sales. But even looking back at its original release, the game launched at a full price, around $50, and for what you got, that was already great value. In terms of length, Half-Life took me roughly 15 hours to complete. Episode 1 is about 3 hours, and Episode 2 is closer to 6 or 7 hours. And what I really like is that none of this feels padded or stretched out. So for the length and value, this is an easy 10 out of 10. And finally, probably the most important category for me, fun and engagement. This one is completely subjective. It's how much I personally enjoyed this game, how engaging it felt, and whether I actually wanted to keep playing. Overall, Half-Life 2 is a fun game to play, especially because of the gameplay. And once again, the gravity gun is doing a lot of work here. That thing is just a blast to use, and it never really stopped being fun. Experimenting with the environment and seeing what works is where most of my enjoyment came from. That said, there were moments where I struggled a bit. Sometimes it wasn't immediately clear what I was supposed to do next, especially when it came to certain environments or physics-based sections. Some of the driving parts also felt a bit too long for my taste. The difficulty was another mixed point for me. I actually enjoy challenging games, but Half-Life 2 has some pretty sharp difficulty spikes. While I appreciated the setting and the characters, the narrative itself didn't fully grab me emotionally. I never really felt that strong urge of I need to know what happens next. For me, the motivation to keep playing came more from the gameplay than the story. So in the end, I enjoyed Half-Life 2. It's a very good game. And I had fun with it, especially mechanically, but it wasn't a game that completely pulled me in emotionally or made me feel obsessed with finishing it. For fun and engagement, I'm giving Half-Life 2 an 8 out of 10. Alright, let's wrap this up and look at the final score for Half-Life 2. Story and setting, 8 out of 10. Strong world building and memorable characters. Just the narrative itself, it's not that strong, but still very enjoyable. Gameplay and controls is a 10 out of 10. Still feels great to play, and the gravity gun is genuinely timeless. Game and level design, a 10 out of 10. Creative, varied, and incredibly influential level design. Player choice, for me, that's a 7 out of 10. Some freedom in how you approach combat, but clearly a linear experience and not so many play styles to experiment with. Graphics and art style, for me, this one is 10 out of 10. Aged surprisingly well, carried by strong art direction and excellent facial animation as well. Performance and stability, 10 out of 10, no problems for me. And also back in 2004, it was very well optimized. Sound, music, and voice acting. Voice acting is excellent. Sound is good. Music, not that memorable. So that's why 8 out of 10. Innovation and creativity, easy 10 out of 10. One of the most revolutionary games of all time. So easily 10 out of 10. And length and value, also tight pacing, no filler, and outstanding value. So this one is also an easy 10 out of 10. Definitely worth your money. And fun and engagement is 8 out of 10. This one is extremely subjective. That's just my opinion. I like this game. I had fun with it, but it wasn't as engaging as maybe some other games. So still 8 out of 10 is a good score. And that gives Half-Life 2 a final score of 91 out of 100. Now, I do want to say this clearly, a score of 91 might feel a bit low for a game that's often called the best game ever made. And honestly, I completely understand that. Objectively speaking, Half-Life 2 is one of the most revolutionary games of all time. And if you think this is the greatest game ever made, I'm absolutely with you on that. This score is just my personal experience. I really enjoyed the game, I had a lot of fun with it, and I massively respect what it achieved. It just didn't hit me emotionally in the same way some other games do. But 91 is still a very high score, and Half-Life 2 fully deserves its legendary status. And I think everyone should play and try it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, consider liking the video and subscribing to Login so you can stay logged in for more deep dived game reviews. And if you have played Half-Life 2, let me know how would you score it using my rubric down in the comments. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.